How technical do you want me to get? For example, Job is an ancient Sumerian story that the Hebrews inserted a whole lot of Hebrew poetry in the middle of that helps you understand the book. It's wisdom literature, not history. That might rattle some cages. I've done workshops and had some chaplains once when I said, we have to look at Job as a story, not as history, because it's in wisdom literature, not a historical book. And there's a couple of chaplains like, whoa. And I don't know if that's going to rattle cages. I don't want to rattle cages. I want to help people. I'm Dr. Todd Johnson, the Brem Chair for Worship Theology and the Arts at Fuller Theological Seminary. My training is in the area of worship and spirituality and liturgy, but I'm here to talk to you about story. That is the story of Job. Job is not a unique text to the Hebrew Scriptures. We have copies of a story of a man named Job going back 2,000 years before Christ in Sumeria. The Hebrew writers that crafted what we call the book of Job in our Scriptures inserted a great deal of poetic material which sits between the beginning and end of that story, in which Job isn't patient anymore, but is instead pretty exercised of the fact that he has been unjustly treated because he has not been an unjust person. The story is of this man who has so much, so many sheep, so many camels, so many oxen, and a wonderful family. The question is, does Job have a relationship with God just to maintain his wealth? He's accused of that by the court advocate in heaven, famously known as Satan. He makes an agreement with God that he can take those things away from Job and see if he curses God or his life. The question that Job raises is, what sort of language do you use for God in difficult and challenging times? What sort of language will Job use? The popular response to travail happening in your life is to curse God and die. And that's in fact what Job's wife encourages him to do. Then there's the language of doubt. The three friends that visit Job embody this language of doubt. The first, Eliphaz, claims Job is simply an innocent victim. All humankind is sinful. Therefore, he experiences sin even if he hasn't sinned himself because he lives among people. It's a fallen world after all, and you can expect nothing more. Bildad, on the other hand, says he's a victim of the system. Someone in his family or someone nearby him must have sinned, and he is getting the collateral damage. Zophar simply says, Job, you're lying. You're guilty. No one is sinless, not even you. Throughout it all, Job maintains his innocence against these three classic examples of explaining pain in light of God's justice, or what we call theodicy. These were illustrating three common understandings of explaining justice and pain at the time of this writing. Job maintains his innocence throughout. And here we have a fourth character, Elihu. The person who actually changes the story the most is Elihu. He says, don't talk at God, don't accuse God, don't talk about God, don't do theology, talk to God. Address him directly, and if you are in fact innocent, God will respond to you. What's suggested in this is that prayer actually completes theology. Theology can only explain so much, but we turn to God with our questions in prayer, asking for God to respond. And God does respond. God explains to Job that he has, in fact, much more wisdom than Job possibly can understand. He has a perspective that no human being, however innocent, could ever have. And he offers to Job that correction. Job then understands that he has limited insights, even though he is innocent. In the end, however, God vindicates Job, telling his friends that they have in fact been wrong and Job has been right. He has been innocent, and he offers sacrifices on behalf of his friends so that they might be restored back in relationship with God. In the end, Job is restored. Twice as many cattle, twice as many sheep, twice as many oxen, 7 boys and 3 girls, just as he had before. But now, all 3 of his girls are considered equals with his sons. They are named and considered part of the inheritance. He has a new understanding of humanity, and he has a new understanding of his own life. So when Job ends, he has lived 7 generations, or 20 years, which for the Hebrew mind was almost an eternity. So Job lived a perfect life. One of the themes of Job is silence. And it's interesting the way silence is used in this book as a piece of transformation of Job's understanding. Job describes his life before the calamities fell on him in this way in chapter 29. Oh, that I were as if in the months of old, as in the days when God watched over me, when his lamp shone over my head, and by his light I walked through darkness. When I was in my prime, when the friendship of God was upon my tent, when the Almighty was still with me, when children were around me, when my steps were washed with milk, and the rock poured out for me streams of oil, when I went out to the gate of the city and took my seat at the square, young men saw me and withdrew, and the aged rose up and stood, and they laid their hands on their mouths, and the voices of princes were hushed, and their tongues stuck to the roof of their mouths. You see, out of respect for Job, they were silent because he was wise and just. But after Job has encountered God and been given a greater perspective than he had before, you see now that Job is in a posture of silence. In chapter 40, then Job answered the Lord, "See, I am of small account. What shall I answer you? I lay my hand on my mouth. I have spoken once. I will not answer twice, but will proceed no further." The wisdom of God, the mystery of God, silences even the most just, even the most wise. It opens us all up to a posture of humility before the mysteries of life, death, and the love of our God in the midst of it.